Happy New Year's. This is Skyler, aka Sir Elias with an American accent, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing best-selling author Tamara Leigh. Since 1994, Tamara Leigh has been published with Bantam Books, HarperCollins, and Random House. She is the award-winning USA Today best-selling author of over 30 novels, including The Unveiling, Merciless, Dreamspell, Baron of Godsmere, and Stealing Ada. Tamara lives near Nashville with her husband, a German shepherd who has never met a squeaky toy she can't destroy, and a feisty Morkie who keeps her company during long riding stints. Tamara, it is a pleasure to speak with you today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Skyler.
So, have a few questions here from your readers. Thank you to all who submitted your questions. We'll get through them here one at a time. Let's get started. First off, how old were you when you started writing?
Well, I've been writing obviously for a long time, and when I was very young, writing little stories, but seriously writing outside of school assignments, I'd say probably around the age of 15 or so, when I really started thinking, I can write a book. I will write a book. I was a dreamer, but hey, this dream came true.
And what would you say to other dreamers that are looking to accomplish the same thing that you have?
Follow the dream. There's never been a better time to write, to be a writer. There's a lot more competition than before. Well, in a way there is, but I think you can follow that dream if it's truly in you, that even if you don't end up with a huge audience, there's no reason you shouldn't put your stories out there.
Brilliant. And speaking of that dream that began at the age of 15 when you put pen to paper, when did you realize that you were a writer?
I guess I really truly considered myself a writer when I had the ability to earn an income and the possibility of a career doing so. And that would be after an agent signed me for my first full-length medieval romance, which was originally titled Warrior Bride. And when I rewrote it into a clean read for the inspirational clean read market, it was retitled Lady at Arms. So that was 1993. 1 year before. No, that was the year you were born.
You were probably in contract negotiations 1 year before I was born.
I signed the contract in 93 and the book came out in 94. That's where I got messed up. So.
Okay. Now, turning to the actual writing process itself, can you walk us through that? How would you describe your writing process?
I'm mostly a seat-of-the-pants writer, meaning I have a loose plot for the story, and I'm fairly acquainted with the characters of the hero and heroine specifically. Then I start writing. 90% of the time I use pen and paper, which, yes, must then be typed in later, and that's kind of a bear, but it's worth it. I let the characters lead me where they will, which makes for an exciting time of discovery for this writer. I can't tell you how often throughout the creation of a story I've caught my breath or given a shout of joy when I thought my hero or heroine was heading in a totally different direction from the one they took me on, which was often proves to be an exhilarating detour. And there's always at least one minor character who surprises me by rising to the top, whether they become worthy of their own tale or they simply add greater depth to the story. I really love writing.
And I'm sure your readers are happy you do. Now, taking it a step further, do you set actual office hours for yourself that are dedicated to your writing?
Most mornings, and these usually start before dawn, I begin at my favorite Starbucks where I tackle the administrative side of writing, which can take an hour, sometimes 2 or 3. Then I will edit the previous day's writing. And after that, once I've had a latte in me and maybe some goodies, I will head home. And that's where I do most of my writing with as few interruptions as possible. And that can last 5 hours. It can last 8 or 10 hours. It just depends on how well it's going.
The life of a writer. Now, delving a bit deeper and in a different direction, do you have a word count that you try to adhere to each day? You talked about the writing process and your office hours at Starbucks and at home, but do you have a word count?
I don't have any set word count, though I feel very accomplished on those days when I hit 1,000 words. And talk about a high when I exceed that. From time to time, I have hit 2,000 and 3,000 words in one day, but often when that happens, blessing that it is, it can drain my creative pond so much and so quickly that over the next day or two, I write far less, if at all. So averages
How are you able to keep the dialogue so true to the time period? Obviously, you're incorporating a bunch of the lingo of the day, but how do you maintain that faithfulness to the time period itself?
I believe it's a combination of concise, formal speech lacking the shortcuts of contractions, and then the addition of medievally flavored words such as tis, twas, forsooth, sin night, fortnight.
Forsooth, I have not heard of that one.
Truly. That's what I think allows readers and myself to sink into that time period. To be truly true to the time period would leave readers and me scratching their heads. I believe I've found a pretty good balance.
From where did your love of the medieval time period come?
That's an easy question. My love for the Middle Ages started with reading romance novels by Joanna Lindsey, Kathleen Woodiwiss, and Jude Devereux. There's just something about knights, ladies, castles, steeds, chivalry, and especially pervasive faith that just really appeals to me.
Which of the classics is your favorite book, or do you have one?
I have several favorite ones, but the first that comes to mind is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And I think the reason it does come to mind so quickly is because I was so intrigued by how true it was, the book. Well, I guess I should say the miniseries was to the book, because I watched the miniseries first, and then afterwards I read the book, and I was amazed that they were so true to it, and it's wonderful. So, and I have to tell you, that's not all because of Richard Armitage, though, well, and as for the miniseries, though, I have to say that they did greatly improve on the final scene by setting it in the train station. Oh, be still my beating heart. No, don't be still.
How did that originally end?
If I remember right, it's been a while since I read it, but it ends with him coming to her home in London, or where she's staying, and I think they're in a sitting room, if I remember correctly. I just remember it was so mild, and it was romantic, but it wasn't like the miniseries.
Needs a little more of a modern flair, like a train station.
I'll take it.
Now, if I could ask a question of the characters you've written about, was there one that went through something particularly hard that made you cry or upset you the most?
I believe Lady Laura of The Awakening and Lady Eleanor of Baron of Godsmere most affected me. Getting into their heads and hearts as they struggled to put traumatic past behind them and find hope and safety and love. And the heads, hearts, and yes, arms of worthy men often left me drained and weepy. And I know that sounds silly, but that's me.
Which book was the hardest for you to write, emotionally speaking? Now, we talked about you connecting with the characters themselves, but as a whole, which book was the toughest to write?
That's a tough question, but there are four that come to mind. Lady of Eve, The Redeeming, The Awakening, and Baron of Godsmere. The heroines of those four stories all struggle with sexual sin, whether it's a result of them making the wrong choice or some terrible act being perpetrated against them. That was pretty emotional. It's hard to write.
Now, which book have you written that has ministered to you the most?
Oh boy, that's a stumper. The first that comes to mind is Stealing Ada. That's my humorous contemporary romance about a best-selling historical romance writer. Yeah, I know. It was my first book written for the inspirational market, and it transitioned me out of the general market. No longer did I have to suppress my faith in favor of requisite love scenes. I could let my love of the Lord spring from mind and heart and onto the paper. And so I leapt, and I was freed.
I gotta know, who is Izzy Wolfrith marrying? Am I pronouncing that right? Issy?
Yes.
Issy, okay, got it. Not Izzy, Issy. Will we find out?
Okay. Issy, just so you know, comes from her grandmother's name, Isabel. So that's why it's Issy. Regarding who she's going to be marrying, as I alluded to in a previous book, I got to know that too. I don't. And I don't know when I'll get back to the 12th century Wolfriths, but I imagine one of the first books I do write will feature Issy Wolfrith. As for who she's marrying, well, she hasn't let me in on that yet.
Now, thank you for your time today. Any last words you'd like to bestow upon your readers?
Oh, thank you so much for joining me on my writing journey. It's been incredible, and I hope you'll continue to be with me on this journey. I'm very blessed by all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tamara, and a Happy New Year's to all of our listeners.
Happy New Year's.